Welcome to the deep dive. We're plunging headfirst again into some really fascinating currents of knowledge, trying to bring you those essential nuggets that, cut through all the noise.
That's the goal.
And today we're taking a truly granular look, really zooming in on something that, well, it's often overlooked, isn't it?
Absolutely. Massively overlooked.
But it's monumental in the grand scheme of influence and power. We're talking about the profound role of detail.
Detail. The small stuff.
Exactly. Okay, let's unpack this a bit. When we think of power, our minds usually jump to like grand gestures, right? Bold pronouncements, maybe even brute force.
Yeah, the big picture stuff. Emperors, conquerors,
Yeah.
big dramatic actions.
Right. We picture these historical figures wielding their will through sheer presence or, overwhelming might.
Mm-hmm.
But what if I told you that true lasting power, the kind that really shapes outcomes, shifts perceptions, maybe fundamentally alters the course of events,
Yeah.
often hinges on the most intricate, the most subtle, the most meticulously managed details?
Okay, I'm following. So not the broad strokes.
The microscopic brushstrokes, the
Granular.
ones that, when they're applied just right, complete the masterpiece and genuinely make all the difference.
I like that analogy.
So, this deep dive, we're going to reveal how historical figures, often masters of principles like those in, say, Robert Greene's The 48 Laws of Power, showed this almost obsessive attention to the small things.
Obsessive is probably the right word sometimes.
It really seems like it. We're talking nuanced observations, the precise crafting of an image, the perfect timing of an action, all those seemingly minor elements that, when you look closely, turn out to be the real levers of influence.
Hidden gears?
Yeah. We're pulling from a rich collection of these historical insights, these strategic principles today. And our mission, as always, is to distill those key nuggets of knowledge for you, the ones that truly unlock understanding.
And what's truly fascinating here, what these historical examples consistently show, is that just scratching the surface, having a surface-level understanding of events or people's motivations, well, it's profoundly insufficient if you want real insight.
Right. You just see the obvious.
Exactly.
Right.
We perceive the visible, the declared, the stuff people want us to see. But true understanding and consequently real power almost always resides in the granular specifics.
Getting down to the tiny details.
It's about recognizing patterns, connecting dots that the casual observer just completely misses. It's delving into the underlying mechanics of how people tick, how interactions actually work.
Okay.
Now, it's really crucial to understand our purpose here today. This isn't about, endorsing manipulation. We're not advocating for some kind of Machiavellian approach in your daily life.
No, definitely not. That's not the aim.
Rather, it's about fostering critical thinking. It's about self-awareness, understanding these deep mechanics of human interaction, of strategic advantage. It helps you navigate the world.
And maybe see when those levers are being used on you.
Precisely. It's about being well-informed about the hidden levers of influence all around you. It allows you to, well, navigate it better and also avoid being ensnared by it.
Makes sense.
Think of it like learning the rules of a really complex game. You learn them not just to play it better yourself, but also to understand how others are playing it.
I completely agree. It's like gaining X-ray vision into the matrix of human dynamics instead of just seeing the superficial code flashing by.
That's a great way to put it.
So our first dive into this realm of detail. It reveals that to influence others effectively, you first have to become a real detective. A detective of human desires, vulnerabilities, aspirations.
You need to know what makes people tick.
Exactly. And often it's by picking up on the smallest cues, the hidden needs, the things people don't even say.
Unspoken stuff.
Which brings us to a really compelling principle, one that's quite counterintuitive on the surface. Law 12. Use selective honesty and generosity to disarm your victim.
Ah, yes, this one. It's a profoundly insightful look into human psychology, isn't it?
It really is.
The core idea, basically, is that a single, precisely timed act, something that looks really sincere or open-hearted, can utterly neutralize even the most suspicious people.
Just one act.
One well-placed act.
Mhm.
It allows you to bypass their defenses. It's not about being generally kind or nice all the time.
No, this isn't general niceness.
Not at all. It's a calculated, strategic maneuver. It relies on a very detailed psychological understanding that, deep down, people want to trust acts of apparent goodwill. We're sort of wired for it. So this one gesture, it transforms into a kind of Trojan horse, a seemingly harmless gift, right? But once it's accepted, emotionally or literally, it opens up a pathway for later influence, maybe even deception.
So the key detail isn't the generosity itself.
No, it's the selectivity and the timing. It has to be tailored specifically to that individual, hitting them where they're most receptive, and delivered at just the right moment to lower their guard.
And the historical examples illustrating this are just, wow.
Incredible.
They really bring it to life. Take Count Victor Lustig. Sometimes called the Yellow Kid, a con artist of legendary skill.
None of the greats, in a dubious way.
And his audacious encounter with, of all people, Al Capone.
Right, Capone. Not someone you'd think would be easily fooled.
Exactly. But Lustig was renowned for this uncanny knowledge of human psychology. He apparently boasted he could size up a man in minutes, discovering his weaknesses, said he had radar for sucker.
He knew how to read people.
And he honed in on Capone's massive pride, his overconfidence, too. Those were the key vulnerabilities. Lustig recognized that a man who sees himself as untouchable, well, he might actually be incredibly susceptible to a very specific kind of trust building.
If you hit the right note.
Precisely. So Lustig approaches Capone, offers him a chance to invest in this supposedly revolutionary money-copying machine.
Okay, the classic impossible gadget scam.
Right. He gets a $5,000 advance from Capone for this fantastical device. Now, here's where the genius comes in. The critical detail of the deception.
A twist.
After about a month, Lustig goes back to Capone and returns the entire $5,000.
Returns it. Wow.
Yep. Explained, apparently, with this tone of sincere regret that the machine was running slower than expected, and he just couldn't bear the thought of Capone, such an important man, losing a single penny.
Oh, that's good. That is really good.
It was the masterstroke. This seemingly honest, incredibly generous act that was a sincere move. It completely disarmed Al Capone.
Because it flips the script entirely.
Totally. Here's a guy, Capone, who's constantly on guard against betrayal, against scams, and suddenly he meets someone who takes his money and then returns it.
Unthinkable.
His rational defenses just crumbled. Convinced of Lustig's honesty by this specific, totally unexpected detail, Capone decided Lustig must be genuine. Maybe a bit incompetent, sure, but honest.
Lowered his guard completely.
Completely. And so, convinced by this display of, quote, integrity, Capone readily invested a much larger sum, $35,000, into the exact same scam.
And lost it all, presumably.
Lost it all. That small, upfront display of honesty, that one specific detail, paved the way for a much, much larger deception. All because Lustig understood Capone's specific psychological need. Maybe the need to believe he was astute, dealing with honorable, if clumsy, people.
It really is a masterclass in psychological warfare, executed with just meticulous attention to detail.
Isn't it?
And there's another equally potent illustration. This one involves Lord Gordon, another one of these masterful con artists, and the American Railroad Baron Jay Gould.
Gould, a formidable figure, right? Notoriously shrewd.
Extremely shrewd. But at this particular time, he was embroiled in this crippling crisis. Phony stock certificates, a huge mess threatening his empire, his reputation. He was desperate for a solution.
Vulnerable despite his power.
Exactly. Gordon saw this precise vulnerability. He offered help. But here's the key. His masterstroke wasn't just offering vague advice, which Gould probably would have just dismissed.
Right, Gould wouldn't trust mere talk.
No. Instead, Gordon presented concrete, verifiable proof, or what looked like it. He specifically hired handwriting experts.
Ah, the tangible detail.
Yes. And these experts, through their detailed analysis, supposedly proved that top executives within Gould's own Erie Railroad were the culprits behind the phony certificates.
Turning the blame inward using experts. Clever.
Very clever. It wasn't just talk. It was this tangible, meticulously fabricated piece of proof. And it instantly gained Gould's gratitude and, more importantly, his trust.
The fabricated detail sealed the deal.
Absolutely. So now, Gould's guard is down, thanks to this meticulously crafted evidence. He's vulnerable. And then Gordon makes his real move. He proposes they join forces to buy up a controlling interest in Erie.
The larger scheme emerges.
Exactly. A scheme that would let Gordon exploit Gould's trust for his own massive financial gain. The specifics of that fabricated proof, that crucial detail, open the door wide for the larger con.
It just shows, doesn't it? True strategic brilliance in dealing with people comes from that deep, detailed understanding of their individual psychology.
It does. It enables the precise deployment of these disarming tactics.
Yeah.
It's about finding that one precise lever, that specific detail that overcomes all their natural resistance.
Indeed. These anecdotes really hammer home that point. You need that detailed understanding to know exactly which string to pull and when for maximum impact.
Mm-hmm.
And that leads us quite naturally to another critical principle about human motivation, which also hinges on understanding specifics. Law 13. When asking for help, appeal to people's self-interest, never to their mercy or gratitude.
Yes. This one is quite stark, isn't it? Very pragmatic. It lays bare a fundamental truth about what really motivates people in strategic situations.
Feels a bit cold, but maybe realistic.
Often, yes. The core idea is simple. When you need assistance, don't bother reminding allies of favors you did for them in the past. Don't appeal to their compassion, however genuine your need might be. It's usually pointless.
So forget, remember when I helped you.
Forget it. Instead, you have to meticulously identify and then emphasize how your request or your proposed alliance will specifically and ideally disproportionately benefit them.
Focus entirely on their gain.
Precisely. Tangible gain. The detail here lies in your ability to uncover and then clearly articulate the precise benefits that the other party will get. You make the proposal irresistible because it aligns perfectly with their own perceived advantage.
Because self-interest is more reliable than sentiment.
Far more reliable, usually. Sentiment, gratitude, mercy, these are often fleeting or non-existent, especially when stakes are high. Self-interest is a much more potent, dependable lever. It's a cold reality, maybe, but an effective one in the world of power.
It is pure pragmatism. And history seems full of examples where understanding this specific detail saved the day, or at least secured a critical advantage.
Absolutely.
Consider the incredible story of Yelu Chutai and Genghis Khan.
Oh, a classic example.
So after the Mongols had conquered a huge chunk of China, Genghis Khan, this man of immense power, but also, immense practicality.
Very practical, yes.
He saw no immediate value in its vast culture. His first thought was basically, let's just clear it out for pasture for the horses.
Hard to imagine, but that was his perspective.
His initial ambition was brutal, sweeping, obliterate Chinese civilization. He apparently believed it would be better to exterminate the Chinese and let the grass grow.
Chilling.
So Yelu Chutai, he was a foreigner serving Khan, but he actually deeply appreciated Chinese culture. He faced this, impossible task.
How do you argue against extermination with Genghis Khan?
Right, appealing to Khan's mercy. Morality, historical preservation, utterly futile. Those sentiments would just fall on deaf ears.
He needed a different angle.
Yeah.
Based on Khan's interests.
Exactly. Chutai, with this keen insight into Khan's detailed priorities, appealed directly, laser-like, to Khan's economic self-interest.
The money angle.
He argued that exterminating the Chinese would actually be a monumental waste. He meticulously explained how the Chinese people could, in fact, be a continuous, inexhaustible source of taxes and revenue.
A cash cow, essentially.
Pretty much. Providing gold, silver, and pearls for the Mongol treasury indefinitely. He presented this detailed argument focused entirely on sustained material gain, a never-ending income stream. Far more valuable, he argued, than a one-time act of destruction.
Appealing directly to the bottom line.
And it worked. This precise appeal to specific material benefits directly countered Khan's destructive impulse. It ultimately saved Chinese culture. All because Chutai paid attention to the details of Khan's fundamental priorities. Power, yes, but also wealth.
That example just perfectly highlights how a deep, detailed understanding of another's core motivations, their real drivers, can redirect even monumental forces.
It really does.
And there's an equally powerful, perhaps even more meticulously detailed example of this same principle. It involves Joseph Duveen, the legendary art dealer.
The guy who sold masterpieces to millionaires?
That's him. And Andrew Mellon, the famously stiff, taciturn American industrialist, financier, politician, very powerful, very reserved man. Duveen desperately wanted to sell paintings to Mellon, but Mellon had explicitly stated he had absolutely no desire to even meet Duveen.
A tough nut to crack.
Extremely. And to make it harder, Mellon was facing some significant issues. Huge inheritance taxes looming over his vast art collection, and quite literally, he was running out of wall space in his homes for any new art.
So multiple obstacles, practical ones too.
Right. But Duveen wasn't easily deterred. He undertook this extraordinary level of detailed intelligence gathering.
He did his homework.
Oh, beyond homework. For several years, apparently, he tracked his prey. He learned Mellon's habits, tastes, and phobias with an almost obsessive focus, getting into the granular details of the man's life.
Wow. Several years.
And crucially, here's a key detail. He secretly put several of Mellon's personal staff on his own payroll.
No way. His own spies.
Well, essentially, yes. Specifically to extract valuable information about Mellon's financial situation, his personal desires, his long-term anxieties and goals.
That's next-level detail gathering.
It is. Armed with this intimate, granular knowledge, Duveen understood something critical. Just trying to sell Mellon another painting was completely futile. Mellon didn't need another painting. He needed solutions to his specific, detailed problems.
The taxes, the wall space, maybe something deeper.
Exactly. So Duveen didn't just try to sell Mellon art in the usual way. Instead, he orchestrated the creation of the magnificent National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C., a huge public institution established in 1937.
He helped create the National Gallery.
He was a key mover behind it. And then strategically, he encouraged Mellon to donate his entire priceless collection to this new national museum.
Solving Mellon's problem.
Perfectly. This brilliant move allowed Mellon to achieve multiple, precise objectives simultaneously. First, he legally avoided those crippling inheritance taxes on his art. Huge financial problem solved.
Okay, practical benefit covered.
Second, and just as important for a man like Mellon, it allowed him to gain immense public recognition and secure a lasting legacy as one of America's greatest philanthropists, addressing that deep, maybe unspoken, desire for enduring respect and status.
So it hit the financial and the ego the legacy needs.
Precisely. Duveen masterfully exploited Mellon's specific, detailed needs, the need for a smart financial strategy, the need for a positive public image, the need for a legacy. It just showcases how overlooking those minute details of someone's true motivations is a profound miscalculation.
Yeah.
It's not enough to know what someone might want vaguely. The real power lies in understanding why they want it and what specific, often unstated benefits, right down to the tax code or the exact kind of public image, will actually move them.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, then, these examples just powerfully illustrate that ignoring the minute, almost invisible details of another person's true motivations, well, it's a huge miscalculation in almost any interaction.
A fundamental error.
It's not enough to know what someone might want superficially. You need to know why they want it, what specific, maybe hidden benefits will genuinely move them to act.
It's the difference between guessing and truly knowing your audience, knowing the person in front of you.
Right. Now, let's shift focus a bit. We've talked about observing others in detail. What about something more under your own control? The meticulous crafting of your own public persona.
Controlling the narrative about yourself.
Exactly. Because your public image isn't just about who you inherently are, is it? It's about how meticulously you construct and present every single impression, right down to the words you choose.
Or maybe even more important,
The words you don't choose, the silences.
precisely. And this leads us straight into another fascinating and often quite challenging principle. Law 4. Always say less than necessary.
Ooh, I like this one. Counterintuitive in our noisy world.
Very much so. The core idea is that if you're aiming to impress people or exert control or just seem more powerful, speaking less actually makes you appear more profound, more in command, more mysterious.
Less is more, literally.
In this context, yes. Silence, used strategically, can create a kind of discomfort in others. It prompts them to fill the void with their own interpretations, their own anxieties, and that often works directly to your advantage.
They project onto your silence.
Exactly. The detail here isn't about what you say, it's about the precise economy of your words.
Yeah.
Focusing on impact over sheer volume.
Quality over quantity.
All right. This law really underscores that power, in many ways, is a game of appearances. And the true power of detail here lies in the absence of superfluous information, unnecessary words. That absence cultivates an enigmatic aura.
So it's about knowing exactly what not to say.
And understanding how that silence, or maybe that one brief, impactful statement, can amplify your perceived importance and depth.
King Louis XIV, the Sun King of France, he was apparently an absolute master of this, used it constantly to build his legendary mystique and centralize his power.
The master of the enigmatic pose.
Totally. When his ministers would come to him, present their detailed reports, lay out their opinions, ask for his crucial decision on big matters of state, Louis would just listen in silence.
No immediate reaction.
None. Maintained this unreadable, enigmatic look on his face. Wouldn't interrupt, wouldn't give feedback right away. His response, Almost always was the same phrase, delivered with this air of deep thought. Je verrai. I shall see.
That's it.
That was usually it. Then he'd simply walk away. Never consulted them again on that specific matter. His decision would only become clear weeks, sometimes months later through his actions, his decrees, never through explaining himself to the ministers who brought him the problem in the first place.
Wow. Leaving them completely hanging.
And that deliberate sparseness of words, that calculated silence, created this impression of immense wisdom, almost godlike foresight, and absolute control. It massively enhanced his majesty.
Made him seem larger than life.
Absolutely. Ministers, courtiers, everyone was left to interpret his silence. They often believed he possessed these deep, almost supernatural insights, a profound understanding they couldn't grasp. They projected their own anxieties, their hopes, onto his enigmatic behavior, making him seem even more formidable.
So the withholding of detail was key.
That precise withholding of detailed information wasn't just a personal quirk, it was a cornerstone of his power. It forced everyone around him to constantly speculate about his intentions and ultimately defer to his silently formed judgment.
The contrast to Louis' brilliance here is maybe even more revealing. It highlights the danger of not applying this law, of saying too much.
Like who?
Think of Coriolanus, the Roman soldier.
Ah, the tragic hero.
Right, celebrated war hero, hugely popular initially, admired for his military victories. Seemed like a strong candidate for consulship.
Should have been a shoo-in, maybe.
You'd think, but he lost the election. Why? Because of his second speech. Instead of letting his reputation, his actions speak for themselves. Coriolanus boasted extensively about his past achievements.
Okay, not a good look.
Got worse. He then speculated on the riches he would bring to Rome if they elected him. Big promises, lots of talk.
Revealing too much.
Way too much. The Roman people, who'd admired him from afar as this legendary stoic soldier, suddenly realized, wait, this guy is also kind of a common braggart?
Shattered the image.
Completely.
Yeah.
His failure to control the specific detail of his speech, making it excessive, boastful, ultimately revealing his insecurity, led directly to his public rejection. He gave them too much information, revealed too much of his inner workings, and destroyed the powerful, enigmatic image that silence and understated confidence could have preserved.
It really makes you think, especially now.
It does. It raises a really important question for us in our, hyper-communicative era. World of constant updates, social media, instant feedback. How do you effectively apply always say less than necessary today?
Yeah, seems almost impossible.
Well, it's probably not about being truly uncommunicative or just aloof that wouldn't work. It's more about being deliberately concise, allowing your actions, your results, your measured presence to carry the real weight.
Letting actions speak louder than words.
And recognizing that not every single informational detail needs to be immediately filled in. Sometimes leaving gaps is powerful. It's a very nuanced dance, isn't it? A dance of presence and absence, a meticulous editing of your own public narrative.
A nuanced dance indeed. Letting silence speak volumes, or at least making sure every word you do use is chosen for maximum impact, maximum detail.
Well put.
And speaking of crafting your public self with meticulous detail, our next principle takes this idea even further, perhaps to its most extreme. Law 25, recreate yourself.
The ultimate act of self-definition.
Right. This isn't just, putting on a new outfit or changing your hair color. It's about actively resisting the role society tries to put you in, forging a new deliberate identity, one that consistently commands attention and, crucially, never ever bores the audience.
You have to keep them engaged.
And this requires mastering your own image through what are essentially dramatic devices. It involves meticulous planning and consistent execution of the specific chosen details of that new persona.
This law basically suggests that life, especially in the realm of power and influence, is a form of theater.
Life as performance art.
In a way, yes. You are the director, the set designer, the lead actor in your own production. The detail here isn't just what you present, but the meticulous construction and consistent performance of this chosen identity, making it seem larger than life.
So it's about consciously designing every element.
Every public element, yes. Rather than letting circumstances or societal expectations or what other people think define you, you become an artist, really. Your life is the canvas, and every public interaction is a brushstroke, all meticulously planned to create a specific, powerful impression.
A perfect historical example of this, surely, is Aurore Dupin-Dudevant, who consciously transformed herself into the iconic literary figure George Sand.
Absolutely. A brilliant case study.
Aurora came from a traditional background, found her marriage, the restrictive roles for women in 19th century France, utterly oppressive.
Suffocating.
She yearned for intellectual freedom, moved to Bohemian Paris to become a writer, a field almost entirely dominated by men at the time.
A huge challenge.
So to establish herself as a serious writer, someone who'd be taken seriously in that fiercely competitive male-centric world, she made a really bold decision. Publish under a male pseudonym, George Sand.
A necessary step, perhaps?
But her recreation didn't stop at just the name. That's the key detail. She didn't just adopt a male name. She exaggerated a masculine public image. She embraced details that completely shattered conventions.
Like what specifically?
She wore long men's coats, gray hats, heavy boots, and these dandyish cravats. She smoked cigars in public, incredibly provocative for a woman then.
Making a very deliberate statement.
And she expressed herself like a man, unafraid to dominate conversations, engaging intellectual giants on their own terms. These were all deliberate, specific choices, meticulously applied details designed to create this impressive, unconventional, ultimately commanding identity that just stood out.
She refused to be invisible or dismissed.
Exactly. Paris initially just assumed this impressive new writer was male, and her carefully constructed persona built on the absolute consistency of these detailed choices in appearance, habit, manner, was key to her recreation. Key to her commanding public attention and respect. She literally engineered her own destiny through self-definition, detail by detail.
And if we're talking about engineering destiny through detailed self-presentation, we absolutely have to mention Julius Caesar.
Ah, Caesar, the
right.
master showman.
Plutarch famously described him as an addict of the stage. Someone who meticulously crafted his public image as a great public showman. Caesar understood deeply that power wasn't just about winning battles, it was about commanding the imagination of the people.
The theater of power.
Precisely. He literally said his lines as if they had been scripted. Every public utterance was carefully prepared for maximum effect, maximum resonance.
Every word counted.
Every gesture, too. He gestured and moved through a crowd with a constant sense of how he appeared to his audience, ensuring every posture, every glance, every movement conveyed authority, charisma, confidence.
Hyper-aware of his own presentation.
Constantly. He masterfully incorporated surprise into his appearances and speeches, building drama into his rhetoric, making sure he always captivated attention. He meticulously staged his public appearances, his triumphs, his speeches with grand, broad enough gestures that even the common man could grasp instantly, even without understanding all the complex politics.
Making it accessible, visceral.
Exactly. Every public action, from his specific attire like the famous laurel wreath to his triumphal processions, was a calculated theatrical detail, designed purely to enhance his aura of power, make him seem larger than life, a figure of destiny, utterly unforgettable. These figures, Sand and Caesar, they understood with profound clarity that every single outward detail, from clothes to words to silence to gestures, contributed to a perceived reality. And that reality could be meticulously managed and projected. It was their art form.
Okay, let's unpack this further then. So once you understand people through detailed observation, and you've mastered your own presentation through this meticulously crafted identity, the next critical layer of power seems to be in the execution.
Right, putting strategy into action.
The precise, detailed application of your strategies, knowing exactly when to act, when to hold back, and maybe when to be fluid, adaptable like water.
Yes. Adaptability and timing, crucial elements.
Which brings us perfectly to Law 33, master the art of timing.
This law is so often misunderstood. It's less about speed, about rushing into things, and much more about strategic patience.
Not being hasty.
Exactly. It's about cultivating this aura of unflappability, of patience, never appearing hurried. That implies control over yourself, and by extension, control over time itself.
Projecting calm control.
You become, as the law suggests, a detective of the right moment. Sensing those underlying trends, the subtle shifts in power dynamics, the psychological states of others, it demands meticulous, detailed observation of evolving circumstances.
You need to read the room, read the situation constantly.
Constantly. To know precisely when to strike fiercely or when it's better to stand back, conserve your energy, let things unfold. Timing isn't just passive waiting. It's an active, detailed assessment of the whole environment and everyone in it.
And there's also this idea of forced time.
Right. That's the more aggressive side. Subtly upsetting your opponent's timing, creating anxiety in them, maybe a false sense of urgency, drawing them into making a move before they're ready.
Manipulating their rhythm.
Precisely. The detail throughout is recognizing those subtle shifts, those patterns that tell you whether a moment is ripe for action or requires restraint, or maybe demands a calculated disruption of your opponent's tempo.
The ultimate historical example of mastering timing, patience specifically, has to be Tokugawa Ieyasu of Japan.
Oh, absolutely. The founder of the Tokugawa shogunate. He effectively unified Japan after centuries of civil war. His patience was legendary.
He served under Hideyoshi, right, who was brilliant but maybe too aggressive.
Exactly. Hideyoshi was this whirlwind of aggressive expansion. Brilliant general, but constantly pushing, constantly expanding. Tokugawa, serving under him, adopted a strategy of extreme, almost superhuman patience.
He just waited.
He stood back when the time was not yet ripe. He patiently waited for Hideyoshi's aggressive, overreaching peak, understanding intuitively that that kind of pace just wasn't sustainable in the long run.
But the other guy burned himself out.
Essentially, Tokugawa didn't get drawn into rash, head-on confrontations he couldn't win. Instead, he allowed Hideyoshi to exhaust himself, engaging numerous enemies, scattering his forces across the vast landscape of Japan and Korea.
Conserving his own strength.
Precisely. Tokugawa understood, with his profound clarity, that power built up slowly and surely over decades is the most enduring, the most impregnable kind. This protracted, detailed long-term perspective allowed him to avoid rash moves, conserve his precious resources, build his own foundations of power quietly, while his rival burned himself out.
Playing the long game with incredible discipline.
Incredible discipline. By effectively slowing down time, meticulously observing the shapes of things to come, seeing the inevitable decline of Hideyoshi's relentless aggression, Tokugawa strategically outlived and outmaneuvered his predecessor. He eventually consolidated power, became the undisputed shogun. It's just a masterclass in the supreme power of holding back, of detailed, disciplined patience.
Wow. And we see a similar, though maybe, as you said, more insidious principle of timing at play with King Henry VIII.
Henry and his great matter.
His campaign to annul his marriage to Catherine of Aragon, he desperately needed a male heir, right, to secure the Tudor dynasty. But Catherine couldn't provide one after years of marriage.
A dynastic crisis brewing.
And Henry became convinced, based on a specific biblical passage he focused on, that their marriage was unlawful from the very beginning.
The justification he needed, or found.
Right. Now, instead of just a sudden, explosive break with Catherine and the Pope, which would have been politically and religiously catastrophic,
Huge upheaval.
Henry embarked on this gradual, detailed campaign to get his annulment. He started slowly, quietly raising the question at first, then year after year, meticulously infecting the papal court with doubts. Using secret discussions, carefully placed theological arguments, legal maneuvering.
Applying steady pressure over time.
Exactly. He never hurried, never lost self-control, even when the Pope resisted strongly. This protracted, meticulous pressure was designed to wear down the opposition over years, allowing diplomatic and legal strategies to take root and grow.
It wasn't weakness. It was strategy.
Absolutely. His slow, deliberate approach wasn't indecision. It was a masterful application of timing. It allowed him to control the narrative, exhaust his opponents, build support, and ultimately, it led to the annulment, his momentous break from the Roman Catholic Church, forever changing England's path.
Another example of the profound power of precise, long-game timing in a super complex political landscape, where every subtle move, every detailed argument eventually builds towards an inevitable outcome if you just keep applying pressure patiently.
It really makes you think.
It does. And it raises that question again. In a world that just constantly rewards instant gratification, quick wins, how do we cultivate this kind of detailed, patient observation, this strategic waiting?
It's tough, resisting that impulse for immediate action.
It is. It means investing in the meticulous study of momentum, of underlying trends, of people's breaking points. And that often requires a very different kind of courage, doesn't it? The courage to wait, to observe, to not act until the perfect moment. A different kind of foresight.
It certainly does. It's about understanding that sometimes the most powerful move is actually no move at all, or maybe a very slow, almost imperceptible, calculated one.
Precisely.
And that fluidity, that ability to adapt without hardening into a predictable form, that feels absolutely key to our final principle of power today. Law 48, assume formlessness.
The principle of water. Be like water, as
Oh,
Bruce Lee said.
exactly. The core idea here is to maintain absolute adaptability, fluidity in your movements, your strategies. You have to actively avoid adopting any predictable, stable form that your enemies can latch onto.
Don't give them a fixed target.
Right. Because when your enemies cannot grasp or define your form, when they can't categorize you, can't pin you down, they just can't effectively attack you or counter you. It requires detailed attention to preventing any exploitable patterns from emerging in your behavior or your strategy.
This law really hammers home that predictability is a profound vulnerability in the game of power. The detail lies in the constant variation of your approach, the endlessly adapting of your form to fit the situation, making it utterly impossible for enemies to pinpoint your next move, your strength, your weakness.
Become impossible to read.
Exactly. It reflects a deep understanding of the environment and the need to be as elusive, as undefinable as, well, liquid metal is the phrase used, never offering a clear, static target.
You see this played out so brilliantly, tragically perhaps, in the Chinese Civil War. That struggle between the Nationalist Army under Chiang Kai-shek and the Communist forces led by Mao Zedong.
A classic example of form versus formlessness.
The Nationalist Army, they were numerically superior, had more conventional training, better equipment in many ways, but they adhered to traditional fixed military forms.
The textbook approach.
Right. They
Yeah.
believed in their superior experience and talent. They fought like a classic, predictable army, seeking big, decisive, pitched battles, trying to hold territory at all costs.
Setting themselves up as a clear target.
While Mao's forces, even though they were vastly outnumbered, out-resourced, they adopted this revolutionary, formless strategy.
Guerrilla tactics perfected.
They dispersed into small units, harassing here, retreating unexpectedly there, never staying in one place for long, willingly giving up towns quickly if it meant avoiding a direct, ruinous fight they couldn't win.
Trading space for time and survival.
They moved like Mercury, never staying in one place, elusive and formless. This detailed lack of fixed form allowed them to evade those decisive battles the nationalists craved, conserve their limited resources, and just relentlessly wear down the predictable nationalist forces through constant, unpredictable guerrilla warfare.
Frustrating them at every turn.
Totally. The nationalists were utterly unable to tackle an enemy that defied categorization. They could never pin Mao down to a specific, defined battle. Their fixed strategies were useless against an enemy that simply wasn't there to be hit when they expected it.
And a result.
They eventually lost the war, a powerful testament to the devastating effectiveness of formlessness against a rigid opponent.
And this concept, formlessness, it can even manifest culturally, can't it, as a kind of strategic defense.
How so?
Consider the historical Japanese adaptability, which, to outsiders, initially looked like a profound weakness.
Appearing easily influenced.
Exactly. There was this Portuguese priest, Juan Rodriguez, living in Japan way back in 1577. And he noted in his writings his utter astonishment at how willingly the Japanese seemed to adopt Portuguese clothing, rosary beads, even crosses.
Just taking on foreign customs readily.
Yeah, he perceived them as highly susceptible to foreign cultures and influences. He interpreted it as a weak, mutable culture, easily swayed.
But that wasn't the real story.
Not according to this interpretation. This apparent weakness, this easy adaptability, was actually a highly sophisticated defense mechanism, a form of protection against military invasion.
How did that work?
By appearing to readily adopt foreign elements, by seeming to embrace new influences without putting up rigid resistance, they subtly seduced Westerners, the Portuguese, later others, into believing Japan wasn't a threat, that they were easily assimilated, malleable, controllable.
So appearing weak kept them safe.
It arguably prevented military imposition, colonization, in a way that more rigid cultures perhaps couldn't avoid. This detailed ability to blend, adapt, appear unthreatening, while crucially maintaining their core identity underneath, was their true formless defense. It made them ungraspable to external aggression, a kind of cultural jujitsu.
Wow, that's a fascinating perspective.
These examples, from Mao's armies to historical Japan, they powerfully demonstrate that power isn't some static state. It's a dynamic, ever-changing dance. And meticulous attention to the smallest shifts, coupled with the ability to avoid rigid details of form, are just paramount to survival and ultimately to victory.
Become impossible to define.
And therefore impossible to decisively defeat.
So, as we've really unpacked today, dug into all these layers, from that initial deep dive into understanding the detailed, often hidden motivations of other people,
Getting inside their heads,
to meticulously crafting and performing your own public image detail by detail.
controlling your own narrative.
And finally, to precisely timing and adapting your strategic moves, being fluid, formless. The resounding message seems incredibly clear. Power truly, truly lies in the details.
It really does seem to crystallize around that point.
It's about the subtle stuff, the unseen things, the carefully managed specifics that just step by tiny step accumulate to build real influence and control.
Yeah.
It's the quiet observation that catches something everyone else missed. The precisely chosen word, or maybe the perfectly timed pause. The seemingly insignificant adaptation that throws everyone off balance. All these microscopic elements that, when you weave them together, form an overwhelming advantage.
And if we connect this back to the bigger picture, living in our world today, saturated with information, complex social dynamics everywhere, true discernment really comes from recognizing these underlying, often hidden mechanics of influence.
Seeing beneath the surface.
Exactly. It encourages you, the listener, to look beyond the obvious, to question those surface assumptions, and to appreciate the intricate, meticulously detailed dance of influence that is happening all around us all the time.
And it's not just about gaining power yourself, is it?
Not at all. It's about understanding how the world works, how decisions are truly made behind the scenes, how perceptions are shaped, often by these very subtle details.
Which raises an important question, doesn't it, for you, listening right now?
Hmm.
What seemingly small details in your own interactions, or in your observations of current events, or even just in your daily information consumption, scrolling through feeds, what tiny details might be the very keys to unlocking unexpected insights, or maybe avoiding unforeseen traps?
That's a powerful question to reflect on. What are we missing because we're not looking closely enough?
Yeah. Consider this. If these historical masters of power, the Lustigs, the Tokugawas, the Caesars, were so meticulously attuned to the smallest things, the most minute and subtle details, what details are you overlooking in your own quest? Whether it's just to be well-informed or to be truly effective in your daily life, your work, your relationships.
What crucial information is hiding in plain sight in the specifics?
Something to definitely mull over until our next deep dive into the fascinating currents of knowledge.